My name is Sunny Boswell. I'm a graduate of HMI and you're watching HMIwebTV News. On the legislative front, the field of hypnotherapy celebrates a major legislative breakthrough. Hypnotherapists Union President and Harvard Law graduate Bruce Bonnett broke the story and explained the detail in this HMIwebTV News conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, important legislative developments have taken place in Indiana that affect the practice of hypnotherapy. Here to address these events is Harvard Law graduate, hypnotherapist, and president of the Hypnotherapists Union Local 472, Bruce Bonnett.
As Livia said, my name is Bruce Bonnett. I'm president of Hypnotherapists Union, and I'm here to announce some really exciting news that we were involved, our union was involved in a successful effort to repeal the most restrictive laws in the country for hypnotherapists in the state of Indiana. So for 13 years, there have been very restrictive laws that made it very difficult to become a hypnotherapist or practice in Indiana, and those are all going to be repealed now. Let me tell you a little bit of history and sort of how this came about, and then I'll take some questions. Basically, this effort started as a bill in the House of Representatives in Indiana. Very interestingly, there's actually a representative in Indiana named Representative Mesmer. Those of you that know about hypnosis know that it was Franz Anton Mesmer, was called the father of hypnotism. Anyway, they got Representative Mesmer to co-author a bill to repeal this licensing scheme in Indiana. It was working its way through the Indiana House. It actually got stalled in committee and died. But a similar bill was introduced in the Indiana Senate, and it was actually a 50-page bill, pretty thick. It involved all kinds of professions. It involved health records, it involved background checks for people that work at home healthcare agencies, it involved barbers, it involved mental health counselors, it involved well pump installers, and animal shelters, and hypnotists. So you can imagine getting this through the Indiana legislature and signed by the governor was not the easiest thing. There's one line in page 48 of the bill that was important for us. That said it repeals Indiana Code Section 25.25.1. That section was a law enacted in 1997 called Regulation of Hypnotists by the Medical Licensing Board. What that bill did basically in Indiana was to establish a committee that was to govern hypnotherapists and hypnotists in Indiana. It was a 6-person committee made up of 3 hypnotists, a physician, a licensed psychologist, and a resident of the state of Indiana. And they were entrusted with the power of regulating the profession of hypnotherapists and hypnotists. To become a hypnotist or hypnotherapist the last 13 years in Indiana, you had to go to a certain school in Indiana. You couldn't have gone to a school anywhere else. You couldn't have done a video course or correspondence course. You had to pass a 3-hour test with 200 questions that was very onerous. And there were other restrictions. Our union was involved in this effort to repeal that, and it was successful. On February 25th, we managed to get the Indiana House to pass this legislation 95-0. On March 8th, we managed to get the Senate of Indiana to approve this legislation 38-7. And just in the last week or two, the governor of Indiana signed the legislation. It goes into effect on July 1st of 2010. Although actually, I doubt they'll be enforcing this law between now and July anyway. I just saw on the website of the Indiana Professional Licensing Agency saying they're no longer going to accept applications for these certificates, and they'll no longer be accepting renewals. So I doubt they're going to be enforcing too much between now and July 1st anyway. Why did this all come about? First, we were hearing from people that wanted to be hypnotherapists and hypnotists in Indiana that were complaining. They hadn't gone to the one school, so they couldn't be certified. They couldn't pass the test because the test was onerous. It involved hypnosis theory, hypnosis ethics. It was very difficult to pass. Groups like ours were pushing to repeal these laws, and there was a study group in Indiana called the Indiana Professional Licensing Committee, which really studied how this licensing scheme worked the last 13 years. And their conclusions were there had been no complaints against hypnotists in 3 years. The Attorney General had not brought any action against hypnotists in 5 years. In 13 years, there had only been one disciplinary action against hypnotists or hypnotherapists. only 60 people had been certified in 13 years, so only 60 people in the entire state of Indiana were allowed to do hypnotherapy. It was really kind of an attempt to collect dues and to restrict competition. And as a result, this effort was made, and our group was very active in it. And I'm very excited and very pleased to announce this sort of the most restrictive laws for hypnotherapists will be gone as of July 1st of this year. Okay? And I'll take some questions if you have any. Sure.
Is the need for referrals effective?
Sure. There was a provision in this law, law from 13 years ago, that said that you had to have referrals if you're a hypnotherapist, if you were dealing with a medical condition, a dental condition, or psychological condition. This law has been repealed, but at the same time, I'm sure there are laws in Indiana that say to treat a medical condition, you have to be a doctor. To treat a dental condition, you have to be a dentist. To treat a psychological or emotional disorder, you have to be a psychologist. So in some ways, the law's been repealed, but I have a feeling the effect's going to be the same. There were also some things in this bill that said that there were conditions that this committee, this hypnotist committee, could specify that you also needed to get a referral for. For example, if someone had a fear of going to the dentist, if someone had a fear of going to the doctor, those kind of things you probably can work on now, is my guess.
How was the Hypnotherapists Union involved and the International Union involved?
We were involved when we found out that this was a possibility. We were involved in both our local chapter, our local union, and our local union is part of the OPEIU, which is the Office and Professional Employees International Union, which has about 150,000 members. And we're also affiliated with the AFL-CIO, which currently has, I believe, 11 million members. So you can imagine when the Indiana legislature found out there were 11 million people that wanted this repealed, they were more apt to vote to repeal it. I was actually getting calls while this bill was making its way through the House and the committees. I was getting calls from the floor from our lobbyists asking, do we want to continue to push this or how should we push it? And we were very active.
How will this affect other states?
Good question. Directly, it won't affect the other states at all because this is only an Indiana law. But the great thing is this is an example of a state now that tried a restrictive licensing scheme, studied it after 13 years and decided it wasn't worth it. It was a waste of everyone's time and money. So if any other states try to restrict our practice, we'll be able to point to Indiana and say, look, they tried it, it didn't work, don't do it.
How can the average hypnotherapist protect our right to practice?
One way is to get involved in the union. By joining the union, anytime any state tries to restrict our practice or affect our practice, we find out about it. And as a result, we can get involved, we can get you involved to call the legislators, we can use our political might with the AFL-CIO to try to influence legislation, and that's the best way. Other questions?
Yeah. Yeah. Does this affect the NLP and guided imagery?
Actually, it does, yes. The question was, does this affect NLP and guided imagery? I believe the original Indiana law not only applied to hypnotism, it applied to anyone using neurolinguistic programming, transformational imagery, guided imagery, or visualization. So all those things were restricted up until now, and they will be not restricted as of July 1st. Other questions? Okay. So it's a very exciting development. As I said, it's not only exciting for hypnotherapists and people that want to practice in Indiana, it's exciting for the rest of the country. We now have an example of a state that tried to restrict us and decided it was a waste of time. It also shows kind of what we can do when we unite and we can sort of influence legislative developments and make sure we protect our profession.
Great.
Okay? Okay. If you have any more questions, I'll be available. Thank you.
My name is Sunny Boswell, and that's what's happening this week at HMI. Now back to Hypnotherapy Television 24/7 on HMI Web TV.